All right, what is going on, guys? We are back for episode 3 of Shotshape Breakdown. Today we're talking about the Spike Hyzer. So we talked about the flex shot, the Hyzer flip. Now we're talking about the Spike Hyzer. If you're not familiar with this series, we're really just talking about certain shots in disc golf, what they are, when they're useful on the course, and kind of just demonstrating what the positioning to get into that, to throwing that shot looks like, and just demonstrating some Hyzers. So we're gonna throw some Spike Hyzers today. If you're a beginner and are not familiar with the terms, I know I've said it before on this series, but maybe it's your first time watching. A Hyzer just means throwing the disc on the angle that the disc fades on. I'm just using this max. A Spike Hyzer is typically thrown with an overstable driver, or not driver, it could be an overstable anything, and putting it on a lot of Hyzer and throwing it high in the air and allowing it to just get into that Hyzer right away. You're not putting it on a flex, you're not throwing it flat, you're just throwing it on Hyzer and allowing it to fade right out of the hand. So I'll give you a couple scenarios where the Spike Hyzer could be useful on the course. One is when you're trying to control the distance of a shot. So that could be a lot of the times when you're throwing downhill, or if you're just throwing a shorter shot. Let's say the hole's 200 feet and it's in the wide open space, opposed to throwing something a little bit straighter and throwing it right at it, or throwing something a little bit stable and trying to throw it flat off to the right. You put it on Hyzer out to the right or left. If you're throwing a sidearm or lefty backhand, you're gonna put it off to the right side of the basket on Hyzer and allow the disc to fade at the basket the whole entire time. And by throwing an overstable disc, you're making it come down to the ground faster and have essentially as little flight as possible. What else you wanna do is throw it relatively higher in the air compared to some like line drive shots. So that way you can put it wider and allow it to swing and come back at the basket. The more height you give it, the more Hyzer you can give it, the more angle you can give it, because it's gonna have more time to swing back. So that's number one, is controlling the distance. Number two is just overall consistency. Because you're putting it on the angle of its natural finish, it doesn't have anything else to do but fade. This shot can really only be done in the open, or if you're throwing over something, which is my third reason why you might throw it. But to get back to this point, it's the most consistent shot in the game, because right out of the hands, you're putting it on this angle, and the only thing it's doing is fading out. In a Hyzer flip, it flips, turns, could go either way. In a flex shot, you could turn it, you're fading it into the middle, and you're getting more distance. The Hyzer isn't meant for distance. It's not for getting the most distance off the tee, and you're probably not going to be throwing it on a par 4 unless it's a short par 4 and you just need to land something in the middle. But what it's good for is a consistent flight. So it's typically good for wide open holes where you can just land it on the basket and you don't have to worry about it turning or fading too early. You just trust it right, and no matter what, it's fading at the basket. So it's going to be the most consistent. It's all just about if you hit your line initially, and then you pretty much know right away if it's going to be good, because it's immediately fading to the basket. So it's easy to judge, it's consistent, and it's going to be the highest percentage. And then I already mentioned it, but throwing over things is going to be the other reason why you would probably throw a Spike Hyzer. If there's big trees in the fairway and you need to go around them, or if there's like a bunch of bushes or something that you need to throw over, then you can just throw it super high on spike angle and get it to go around it or over whatever your obstacle is, and come back to the basket or the fairway, wherever you're throwing. Obviously, this is going to be for shorter shots, because you're throwing it so high and wide and on so much angle that it's going to want to get down to the ground fast. So you're not going to be throwing this, like, if you can throw the disc 350 and a hole's 350, you're not going to be throwing a Spike Hyzer, because you have to work the disc to get there. But if you throw 400 to 450 and you have a 300-foot shot, then yeah, you might be able to throw a Spike Hyzer. Oh, and one last thing, actually, you're getting the disc to stick. So let's say you're in an open field, it's an island hole, and the shot's 300 feet. The disc on a Spike Hyzer angle, because it's coming in at so much angle and at such height, is typically just gonna drop and land exactly where it lands. If it's super dry, then sure, it might get a skip, but in comparison to a normal flat flex shot where it could get ground action or slide, no matter what, it's always coming in at this angle. So the possibilities of action after hitting the ground is much lower. So that's another reason, is just getting it to sit exactly where you want it to. All right, so now I'll kind of demonstrate the positioning you want to be in for the Spike Hyzer. For the Hyzer flip, I know I mentioned kind of having that normal arm reach back and leaning over it. For the Spike Hyzer, you do want to lean over it, but I don't think you just want to lean over as much as you can, because if you get into this position and you pull through on your normal reach back, then you're only going to throw it so high. So for a Spike Hyzer, I think you kind of want to get in your normal standing tall position, bend over a little bit, but this is where you kind of reach your arm and your hand down a little bit and actually create that line with your arm and follow through straight up. Because if you're only tilting through with your body, but your arm is still straight across your chest, you're only going to get, you know, so much angle, to the point where you're better off dropping it down. And if you're standing up a little taller, then you'll be able to finish with the disc higher. So if you want to throw the shot shorter or throw it a little higher, then you could actually stand up and create more of an angle with your arm. If you want to throw the shot a little bit lower but still have that spike angle, then you could lean over a little bit more and drop your hand down a little bit. But for me, I like, if I'm throwing a Spike Hyzer, then I'm trying to throw it, you know, pretty high, not like straight up in the air, but I'm trying to get it pretty high and a pretty consistent flight. So I'm just leaning over a little bit and I'm dropping my arm back. And really, you can just practice, you know, in your practice swing, leaning over, bringing your arm back, and wherever that arm angle is, that's how the disc is going to come up out of your hand. Now, obviously, we're throwing different discs for Spike Hyzers, and, you know, for every hole, if you want the shot to go a little bit further, you might throw a little bit straighter of a disc. It's still, you know, going to need to be a relatively overstable disc, so that way it doesn't flip up or, you know, turn or anything. But whatever hole you're playing, you want to select the right disc for it. And there's domey discs and there's flat discs. And to me, that is kind of what makes the biggest difference in flight when you're throwing a Spike Hyzer. A flat disc is going to want to go up and then come straight down, whereas a domey disc is going to want to go up, push straight, and glide out to the left. So if you have a slightly longer hole and you don't need that disc to dive right on the basket because there's OB or something, but you need the disc to glide a little bit, but you want a little bit more of a consistent shot than like a flat shot, then you could go with something a little bit glidier, give it some height, but allow it to glide left. Whereas if you have a 300, 250 foot shot, you could throw your most overstable flat fairway driver straight up in the air, and it's gonna come straight down and not push that far left. I'll demonstrate with a zone and a recluse to kind of get the throws started. I'll start with the zone. I'm just gonna put it at a mid height and just let it glide left, but it's really gonna be coming down to the ground, and see if I can just make it sit right where it lands. Yeah, so that's perfect. You can imagine if there's, you know, an island out there or just a short hole and you want to step up to it and get the birdie every time, what's going to be more consistent? Throwing that shot where it's fading at the basket the whole time, or throwing a straight putter and trying to make it go straight every single time? This is by far the more consistent shot. That doesn't mean you're going to get it perfect every time. You still could miss left. You could get the power wrong, but that's why you want to practice this shot over and over again, so you could get the feel for how far you're throwing your discs at, you know, different levels of power. So now we'll try it with the recluse. We'll try to put this one a little bit lower and try to make it, you know, kind of glide left a little bit, but still be kind of a Spike Hyzer and sit relatively close to where it lands. Yep. So that's perfect. Still came down low, followed through on Hyzer, but it wasn't as high and as knifey of an angle, but it's still an overstable disc. It's still coming down with a good amount of angle, and it just sat where it's gonna sit. So the main thing I wanna show here with the differences is what I was talking about This Firebird has a slight little dome, but it's just straighter in general. Then I have this FD3 that's bored flat. I want to try to throw them on the same angle and just show you the differences of what these, you know, kind of two shots could look like and where you might use one versus the other. So we'll go with the straighter Firebird first. Try to give it a good amount of height and a good amount of hyzer. This should go around like 300 to 315 feet or so. Yeah, so it wasn't a crazy amount of hyzer where it's coming out vertical, but it's an overstable disc, so you don't have to do that. So it came out on a good amount of hyzer. I threw it nice and hard. It pushed straight for a while on that hyzer angle, but it never wanted to flip over, never wanted to do anything but fade. And then when it landed soft. This is gonna be different. It's not gonna push as much. It's not gonna go as straight. It's gonna get left and it's gonna come straight down. So let's see. Yep, so I didn't throw it as hard, but it was definitely hard enough, but it pushed straight, but started fading out a lot faster, got down to the ground way faster. It didn't want to glide, and when it landed, it even skipped a little bit because it's so overstable, and it's a little bit dry out there, but it didn't get a big skip. It kind of skipped, you know, maybe 10 feet or so. So if it were a shorter hole, and there was OB right or OB left or something, I might go a little more overstable. But if it's more of an open, you know, 315, 320 hole where I could try to flex a mid, or I could try to, you know, throw like a nice little smooth line, I can just take that slightly less overstable Firebird, throw it hard, throw it high, and let it swing to the basket. Now I'll show the difference with some distance drivers. We'll go glidey straight, then flat and kind of straighter, and then a couple overstable domey guys just to show what the Spike Hyzer angle looks like. But we'll go with this slightly domey 21 Kelvin, throw it out there nice and high on hyzer, and just trust that it's going to finish the whole time and just get to the ground. Yep, so it really just depends on how much power you have. For someone with a lower arm speed, they could throw that same exact disc, but throw it for a shorter distance. For me, if I'm throwing that angle, it's probably for 340, you know, 350 shot, nice and high, trusting it's just gonna get to the point every single time. It's never gonna flip, super trusty. Whereas, but it's gliding, right? So if I want something that gets that extra distance and I want to make sure that it kind of stays in the air, versus this could be for a little bit shorter distance, or something that I want to throw a little bit higher over a tree or something and get down, opposed to gliding left. I would probably choose this because it's flatter and it wants to get down a little bit faster. So we'll try to get this one a little bit higher, kind of pretend like I'm almost throwing something, trying to get it above and then come down. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that in the camera. I hope you can, because that was a really good example of what a shot like that could look like. That probably only went 312 feet or so, but it was nice and wide, nice and high, and the only thing it wanted to do was swing left but come down. It wasn't trying to glide left or anything. So now that we saw that, I'm going to throw an overstable glidey guy, and I'm going to throw it on that same angle, and I'm going to see if it swings more left opposed to the flat one coming straight down because of the dome. Yeah, so I put that one a bit wider, and instead of going up and then coming down, it kind of wants to get that glide and fade left. So if you want a little bit more distance, or if you just need it to push back to the left a little bit, then something with a little bit of dome could be good, and it could get you that distance or just get you that little bit of glide at the end. Or you could take your really overstable guy if you have, you know, a longer distance shot, like maybe 350, something around that range, or 300. If you don't have the same arm speed, But you could take your overstable guy, put it more of like a mid height, but still with a good amount of hyzer, and just let it coast. And because it's such an overstable disc, it should get a relatively short skip, if any skip at all. So we'll try to show that for our last shot here. Yeah, so there you go. You take a really overstable disc and you put it on a mid height, and it gets a lot of straight push. So you could use this for a little bit more of a longer shot and just get that straight push. And even though it's coming in at an angle that looks like it might skip, because it's an overstable disc, at the end of the flight, it's going to be coming down a lot more aggressive than, let's say, like a T-bird or a Thunderbird, even on that same angle. So that's it for the hyzer, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.